Welcome to Asia Pacific Defense Reporter, your go-to source for cutting-edge security insights in the region. Get ready for rapid-fire analysis and commentary from the Asia Pacific with your host, Kim Bergman.
Hello and welcome back. Wow, do we have a lot to get through. My previous podcast, questioning the basis of the strategic relationship with the United States, occurred before the awful Trump-Zelenskyy meeting in the White House last Friday. And even before that had took place, I thought that the US was no longer a reliable ally because of an assortment of things, such as threats to invade Greenland and whacking tariffs on allies for no particular reason. And I have to say, the position is now even clearer, and to put it as simply as possible, no previous US ally, including Australia, can take US military aid and political support for granted. That's over. That's a bygone era. I thought the on-camera ambush of Volodymir Zelenskyy was disgusting and a deliberate attempt to humiliate him and pressure him into signing this weird rare earth minerals agreement with no security guarantees whatsoever, which is just plain wrong and would not have had the support of the people of Ukraine. Trump seemed to think that he could browbeat Zelenskyy into signing something with the only security guarantee being, according to Trump, a commitment from Vladimir Putin that he would not attack Ukraine in the future, which clearly has no substance at all. By the way, there's so much online, I'm not going to go through this blow by blow. I'll just give you a very quick summary before moving on. But the entire thing was a stage-managed attempt at humiliating Zelenskyy in front of the cameras. The meeting could have been held behind closed doors. And it turns out, well, we've been aware of this in the background, that Trump in particular cannot stand anyone who argues back. He is such a bully. I'm sorry for that. That's my cat Brian, who's attempting to join in the podcast. He's a bully and he cannot stand anyone who argues back. And the moment that he encounters anything other than the most sycophantic praise, he shouts over people and tries to belittle them. Now, if only some other people behaved like... Oh, I've got to stop it. I'm sorry about that. My cat clearly believes that he's a person and he likes to join in these things. Now, getting back to the Trump-Zelenskyy horror show, as far as I can tell, the main complaint from the US side was that Zelenskyy has shown insufficient gratitude for US aid, when you can go online and find file clips of him saying thank you to various US figures about 100 times. Clearly, Trump is acting as if he were a Russian agent. We don't know why, but the practical effect is that he is trying to further the cause of Russia and President Vladimir Putin. Australians need to remember that Russia is a major Asian power, and the Russian Pacific Fleet based in Petropavlovsk is large and capable. And if the Australian public, media and some politicians are getting agitated about the presence of Chinese warships, I'll try and come back to that, just try and picture what it will be like if the Russians start circumnavigating us as well, with the United States Navy nowhere to be seen. So, as for our government, how has it reacted? Has there been any criticism of Trump? Has our government, like Europe, realized that a security breakup with the US is now inevitable? Of course not. They are all too weak and scared to say anything. When asked about the relationship with the United States in the light of Trump throwing Ukraine and Europe under a bus, all government ministers have exactly the same talking points. Just keep on reinforcing that Australia is a major supplier of aid to Ukraine, about $1.5 billion worth. And that's good. You know, we are an aid donor and a significant one. But come on, Prime Minister, for you to be claiming that somehow you are strong on Ukraine when you, as Prime Minister, went along with the destruction and burial of $1 billion worth of Taipan helicopters, 46 Taipan helicopters gone, rather than donate them to Ukraine. How can you possibly have any credibility left in this field? Now, Australia is about the world's 12th largest economy. So let's have a look at some of the facts when it comes to Ukraine. If we look at the donors to Ukraine overall, combining military aid and civil aid, Australia is 33 on the list. 33, 12th largest economy, number 33. When it comes to purely military aid, we are the world's 10th largest spender on defence, and support for Ukraine, we're the 15th largest or 15th smallest donor, depending on how you look at it. So clearly by either of those metrics, either pure military aid or military and civil aid, we are punching well below our weight. And the time has come, rather than just saying these empty words that we continue to back Ukraine and Russia is the aggressor, we need to do more. Yes, the amount of aid that's gone to Ukraine is good, but Europe is stepping up. France and the UK and the Nordic countries have already committed to more aid. This is in the light that nothing further is coming from the United States, and I think that it is in our national interest to do likewise. One of the most important things that needs to happen, if this government were in any way serious about supporting Ukraine, is to cordon off the funding of military aid from the rest of the defence budget. The way that things are being poorly managed, it means that defence, which is under considerable financial pressure, has to fund the transfer of military aid to Ukraine from within its own resources, also has to pay for things to be prepared for transport, all of that sort of stuff. Defence needs to be supplemented so that it is not money that is coming out of Australian capability, that it's a separate bucket of money. And how much are we talking? I would ideally like something like $500 million a year, which in the scale of this budget is not particularly significant, and it's vital for Australia's interests that other dictators be deterred from aggression. Now, a major issue is, can Ukraine survive without US support? As I say, because it looks like that's going to be cut off. Put simply, it would make life very much harder, but not impossibly so if all of Europe and countries like Australia really put in a major effort. There's a lot of good European military technology available. Many Australians assume that the Western world's largest missile manufacturer is the US company Raytheon, because they supply about 80% of the ADF's inventory, particularly to the Air Force. But the correct answer to the question of who is the largest missile supplier is the European consortium MBDA, which makes everything from anti-tank missiles to really big high-altitude interceptors. Technical experts can argue forever about whether it's Europe or the US that has the best missile technology, but one thing is certain, it's better than anything that Russia has. In terms of aircraft, combat aircraft, Sweden's Gripen multi-role fighter was always a better fit for the needs of Ukraine because of its ease of maintenance, but there are so many US-manufactured F-16s around the place, it was easier to supply those. Now, I wonder if that situation might alter, if we will see Gripens deployed to Ukraine. In any case, France has supplied some Mirage F-2000 fighters, albeit in small numbers, but they don't have any US componentry on them at all. They come with their own weapons, and they have likewise the potential to make a difference. Again, technical experts can argue about the merits of main battle tanks, but Germany's Leopard A2 series are directly comparable with the US-made Abrams, and they both use the same 120mm main gun from Rheinmetall, and they are both superior to Russian armour. The problem is Europe still lacks the ability to deliver systems at the scale of what is available from the US, but it is closing the gap. Also, let's not forget Ukraine's own defence industry, which was in any case considerable back from Soviet Union days when they built aircraft, and the company Antonov is Ukrainian. During the fighting over the last 3 years, they have expanded greatly. Ukraine has become the world leader in the development and use of military drones, most of them at a tactical level, but there are now systems that can hit Russian factories and oil refineries hundreds of kilometres from the front. Large numbers of vessels of the Russian Black Sea Fleet have been sunk or badly damaged. Last year, Ukraine produced about 1 million drones. I'll repeat that. That's not a misprint. 1 million. This year, it's estimated that Ukraine will produce more than 4 million. The amount of damage that they will do to Russia is huge because Russian air defense systems simply cannot cope with drone swarms of that magnitude. On top of that, the Russian economy is in serious trouble with interest rates stuck at a crushing 22% and inflation at 10%. Oh, and that's on top of around 1 million casualties, of whom 300,000 are dead. So it's vital to continue supporting Ukraine. There is hope, even after being outrageously abandoned by the US, that Russia can be defeated. Now, to local things. And last Thursday, I was lucky enough to be at the Hanwha Defence Australia facility at Avalon Airport for the handover of the first two AS9 155mm Huntsman self-propelled howitzers and an in-theatre resupply of vehicles. Also, I was there once again with my friend Andrew Green from the ABC, who I learned has an unnatural terror of cats. I offered my cat Brian to him to hold to show how heavy Brian was, and Andrew behaved as if I was trying to hand him a ticking time bomb. We'll get to the bottom of that in a future podcast. Anyway, getting back to Hanwha, that was attended by Defence Minister Richard Marles, and I'll preface this by saying, as I have done on a number of previous occasions, while I profoundly disagree with the way that he is managing defence and many of the decisions that he's taking, he is a very likeable person. He's very chatty, he spends time with people, he appears to be sincerely interested in listening to them. Now, the transcript is there on the ministerial website, but I asked 2 questions. The first one was about the number of self-propelled howitzers that Australia is acquiring. I brought this up before. We were originally getting 2 regiments. That's about 60 of them. The Defence Strategic Review cut that number to 30, and a corresponding cut in the in-theatre resupply vehicles down to 15 of those. So I asked the minister, in the light of Ukraine's experience, which is showing that you cannot have enough 155mm self-propelled howitzers, is he still happy with that DSR decision, or would he like to see the army equipped with more of them? Which personally I think is a very sensible idea. Anyway, once again, he came up with this weird justification that he's used before, that we don't need more equipment that we cannot deploy overseas at any one time using our 2 Canberra-class LHDs. Each Canberra-class could carry about, 20 of these things, 2 of those, you can do the maths, overlooking the fact, once again, that ships can go backwards and forwards. And using that logic, I look forward to the regular army under this government being cut to 2,000 soldiers, because that's all that 2 LHDs can accommodate. The other question was obviously about the reliability of the US, which I've referred to above, and rather depressingly, Minister Marles could only say that he had a very nice meeting with US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth as Marles was handing over a gift of $800 million taxpayer dollars to US submarine building companies. Now, honestly, people, we have to do better than this. We have to realise that there has been a fundamental seismic shift in the attitude of the United States to the outside world. We have to wake up to that. We have to start reacting to it. And it's worth adding at this juncture, since Hanwha is making an important contribution to Australian self-reliance, with the full backing of South Korea and the South Korean government, which wants to do even more for us, they're acting like a good ally, that with the right policy settings and I think a larger budget, not necessarily alarmingly so, but a larger budget, Australia could stand on our own 2 feet, if not with total independence, then certainly we could be in far better shape than we are today. As I've mentioned previously, we were doing quite a good job of creating a self-reliant ADF in the 80s and 90s, but since then it's been thrown in reverse, and in particular since the 2014 Force Posture Review, Australia has become little more than a staging post for US forces. I really think that it's now clearly in the national interest. We just have to reverse that trend. Now, I want to use the remaining time just to canter through a few more domestic issues. One of them is sort of a Canberra bubble thing that in Senate estimates hearings last week, the head of shipbuilding in defence, Jim McDowell, some of us know Jim quite well. He has been in industry for a long time, very experienced fellow. He estimated that a decision for C3000 will be taken early next year. Now, for some reason, that upset both Defence Minister Miles and Defence Industry Minister Pat Conroy, with both of them backgrounding journalists, not me as it happened, but backgrounding journalists saying, oh, well, Jim McDowell was speaking in a personal capacity. He wasn't speaking on behalf of Defence, which is pretty outrageous, I think. Clearly he was speaking on behalf of Defence. That was why he was there. And they insist that a decision will be taken at the end of this year, or by the end of this year. And it's further evidence of ministers acting irrationally. And I wonder, is it because they can look at the poll numbers and realise that they might not have their jobs for very much longer? Because this weird insistence, sort of bucking the expert advice about timetables, is like, imagine if you took your car to the mechanic who said, based on all of their experience and knowledge, it'll be finished around 4:30 p.m, and you said, forget that, I want it at 2 p.m. So what do you want the mechanic to do? Not change the oil filter? Not check the brakes? Now, this entire process for C3000 is so screwed up anyway that the last thing it needs is a decision-making process that's even more rushed than it already is. And I can see no difference, practical difference, between a decision that's announced in December of this year or one that's announced in March of next year. And what else? We still have the presence, of course, of the Chinese flotilla, which is heading towards Western Australia the last time I checked. And at least it's prompted some reaction with the opposition calling for 24 additional F-35 aircraft for about an extra $3 billion. Well, thank goodness. They were cut by the Defence Strategic Review. I thought that was one of the many poor decisions in the DSR. And for me, it was very disappointing that in response, the best that Labor could come up with was the old, where's the money coming from? Well, the situation is now really urgent, and we're just going to have to find the money and to provide the opposition with the answer to the question rather than ducking it. What you can say is, look, these purchases are not a lump sum of $3 billion being handed over. They are staged payments spread over a number of years. So people, it sounds like a big amount of money in the aggregate, but in fact the consequences for the defence budget are not particularly serious. And a final one, swinging back to the United States and ramifications for AUKUS, with the Department of Government Efficiency slashing the civil workforce. The aforementioned Defence Secretary Peter Hegseth has announced that there will be an 8% cut in the civilian workforce. But get this, in the United States system, submarine repairs are not undertaken by private companies. All repair and maintenance work is in old government-owned facilities. There is already a huge backlog of repairs awaiting Virginia-class submarines, one of which is due to be transferred to Australia in 2032. If 8% of that workforce is cut, clearly it's going to make the maintenance backlog even worse than it is now. Okay, that's all I've got time for. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now, and see you next time.
That's today's Asia-Pacific Defence Reporter. For more in-depth articles, expert opinions and exclusive interviews, visit AsiaPacificDefenceReporter.com. Stay informed, stay ahead. This is your source for all things defence. Until next time.